I can tell you one thing, in this day and age, anyone can learn pretty much anything. Hello, future entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, indie hackers, and solo developers. Today, I'm learning how to test as someone with a background in product management. I only know about testing in terms of what passes, what fails. I've never written tests, and that was not part of my job. But as someone who sold SaaS and now is delivering it, as you might have seen in previous videos, I need to make sure that this is going to be robust. I don't want to be debugging and doing support, as this is subscription based, there's support included. I don't want to be on support tickets all day long. And so I want to know in advance when something is not working, and I want it to be automated because I'm a very, very small team. I want to go through the process of understand, based on my requirements, what kind of test I need, and make them automated. I cannot do this manually. Things have to be automated because it's a small team. We don't have time. We need to, based on the results, right, every time go through the cycle of analyzing what's happening. If something fails, fix it, and go back to running the tests until everything passes. And I'm filming this after spending some time doing it, and I can tell you one thing, in this day and age, anyone can learn pretty much anything. I spent less than 1 day learning the whole thing with Playwright, and if I can do it, you can do it as well. So let's see how it went and what I learned. Starting by consulting with ChatGPT on how to go about it. After a couple of suggestions on using different frameworks, I've decided to go with Playwright because I want the test to be functional. I want the test to basically work with the UI and do sanity testing instead of just me doing it. I want it to be automatic and just run every time I want to deploy a different version or I make a push. Now I'm doing it with Cursor, and as you can see here in this example, it needs a little bit of help. Sometimes it would hallucinate buttons that don't exist, and it would need a little bit of nudge in the right direction, but it's just immensely useful. So obviously definitely recommend doing it with Cursor, not just accepting the suggestions without even reading them. This is a good way to also learn how the syntax works and how to structure your code. So by pinging the composer on Cursor, this can be done with the command I. You basically can ask questions on specific syntax you might not understand, or even on the framework you're using and architectural choices. You can ask what are the trade-offs, the pros and cons of doing something in one way versus another. This is a rabbit hole I go through when I think that a choice being made is going to be important later on. Now the way Playwright works, and the reason I have chosen it, is that it emulates the browser and also emulate an app, but in this case, since it's a desktop kind of SaaS, then it's a web app, and I'm emulating Chrome, and so it would do the testing instead of a tester. Basically, it's an automated functional tests. And what we need is we need to describe where to look at and what button to click, as you can see here with save changes, for example. And later on in this video, you might see that I realized and I learned through this experience that we can actually add a tag that would be called test ID or data test ID, and Playwright would know exactly where to go and what to click. I was able to get Playwright to generate a list of errors and a list of tests into CLI, and this way I was able to iteratively go through the test and fix whatever I need to fix every time. Now, something cool I just ran into without even knowing it works or exists is the new capability for Warp to debug within Warp, which is pretty cool. It's not really bulletproof in any way, not even close to, but it's just fun. If you're creating a script, you're running it on Warp, you'll see in a second, then Warp would actually suggest that you can cat the file into it, so it would get access to specifically the script you're running, and then it would suggest fixes, which is nice. It's going to keep you within the context of your CLI. Now, when I talk about learning through hands-on work, this is what I mean. Like here, for example, there's just suggestion for the double exclamation mark syntax, which I'm not familiar with, and those little micro opportunities, I would call them, to just ask your AI ID what goes over there, what does it mean, is where you can just learn those small things and gain confidence in your app. Another thing to consider, as you'll see here, that and this is fast forwarded, but basically I've been waiting for the test to run. While Playwright by default would use more than one worker, so the test will run in parallel. It just takes time. And when you're just getting started, you definitely don't need many platforms to test your code on. Chrome perhaps is just good enough. You can later on add Safari, Chromium, whatever you might need. But just starting with Chrome, which is probably by far the most used browser, will get you a long way, and you can just comment out the other platforms and just run your tests faster. Now, one thing I think is really, really important is that you want to think on which test you are focusing on. So as you can see here, I'm running 2 tests, and I'm just starting with these. I'll probably have more obviously later on, but one of those tasks we should talk about is double tap on the save button. I have some form that I want to save to the database, and I'm building this for iPad users, so it's going to be a web app on iPad. And because iPad is obviously touch for 99.9% of the cases, I mean, you can run your mouse on it, but most people would use touch, and the people I work with would use touch. I think that just double tapping is more likely that I would like to think, and so double save would probably happen at one point or another, and I want to defensively protect and make sure that, you know, this is not going to crash my app or anything like that. And this is why I think thinking on who are your users, what are the main flows, not just the happy flows, but the main flows and the key sort of functional walkthroughs they might go through is very important in thinking what kind of tasks you're spending time on creating and running. So once again, this is a micro opportunity to learn how the code suggested simulates the double tap, the double click, right? There is like a nested page click on the button on the save button, and I'm just asking cursor to add a comment that would explain to me how this exactly translates to this double tap. So next time I can see it when cursor generates it, and I immediately know that that's the right way to go. Now here I'm asking cursor to double check that there's actually name tags for the buttons and the components we want to test, so Playwright can find them. And so this is where it is being suggested to use the data test ID, and now that's another thing I learned, which we can add as a tag for whatever button we want to be clicked, and then it can be identified in this way. Later on you will see that if we have obviously more than one of these buttons, then there's a violation of uniqueness, and we need to exactly say which one is needed to be clicked. Another pro tip, thanks to Warp for suggesting PW debug equals 1 for Playwright debug situation. You can see it opens on top of the CLI. You can see the test is running, and you can also see what Playwright is doing. So you can actually see how like this puppet, these like virtual puppet clicks buttons, which is just really useful to see where it gets stuck. And you have this emulator on the right here that you can click and step through the different steps, step through the code. Now, funny enough, this suggestion here, you can see, was such a lifesaver, because the suggestion for where to put the test ID for one of the buttons was off. It was suggested for select rather than select trigger, and I was spending perhaps an hour not understanding why Playwright wouldn't find the test ID. And so, as you can see here, logging the available test IDs, which is something I just didn't think about, which obviously you can do by querying by this tag name, just shows you whether those test IDs even exist. And so I was seeing in this list, you see here that the test ID I'm trying to fish it doesn't even exist, like it's not really being generated. And that helped me understand that it's not rather that the naming of that test ID is screwed, but rather it doesn't even exist. Another thing that comes off the shelf with Playwright is those video recordings. So when Playwright runs and creates those sessions, those are by default saved, and you can actually see what Playwright was doing. And finally, after many hours, if you can learn something like this, you can probably learn anything. I don't see why you won't be able to learn whatever concept you want, whether that might be in software engineering or anything technical.